Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Well, hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening. Thank you. I'm John Johnson and I'm hosting the show. And I'm going to talk about dealing with distancing. As of the time of the recording of this podcast, we are dealing with a global pandemic, and that being the coronavirus, and some of the things that we are being asked to do in various communities, and particularly where I'm located here in California. We are asked to shelter in place, meaning stay at home. Many people are asked to work from home. Some people who work in establishments where they make a wage or a salary are being told to stay home, because if it's the kind of business which needs patrons, such as a restaurant or something like that, well, if the customers aren't coming in, then there's no money being made to pay the workers, so they're telling the workers to stay home. Now, they may be terminated so that they can collect unemployment, and with hopefully the idea that when these things pass, that they'll be able to come back to work. Now, if you're a business owner, obviously one of your concerns is can you keep the business sustained while we transition this problem? And obviously the concern would be that there are a lot of businesses that may not be able to come back. So those are a lot of the unknowns that we're going to face during this situation. Now, the other human part to this is the personal distance that we keep from other individuals. And that's so that we don't transmit this coronavirus. And this is what the medical experts are telling us are some of the ways in which we can keep ourselves safe. So dealing with that can be very, very challenging. Many of us who are used to, say, hugging as a greeting, and in many cultures, you know, there's a kiss on the cheek or something really personal like that, and they're being asked to not do that in lieu of, say, maybe a fist bump or an elbow bump or something like that. Again, that's a form of touching, but the idea that in order for us as a society to get through these kinds of situations, we're going to have to modify our personal behavior. And it's very much one of these things that we have to do very abruptly. That is obviously a challenge because we have our ways in which we normally operate and have to be conscious. And I myself today, I'm used to handshaking, and that's my way of greeting people. I had to be reminded, do the elbow bump. And that was, and I was surprised that I had quickly forgotten that. This particular individual that I was talking to was, it was a subject matter. We're talking about music and our relationship to music, and I had a very fun, lighthearted story that I wanted to share. And as I was leaving, I wanted to shake his hand, and he reminded me, nope, can't do that. It's the fist bump kind of thing, or the elbow bump. See, just right there was an example to me that our social customs are going to have to change, at least for the time being. And this can be very difficult because aside from grasping the gravity of the situation, because we're getting updated reports all the time. We wonder, okay, what do we trust? Is this really as bad as they say it is? Who do I trust? What information is reliable? I'm sure all of these things roam through your minds. Is this being overhyped? Is what's there really to be concerned about? Well, I think any reasonable person would certainly defer to the experts, the so-called experts, because we figure we have to trust somebody, something, somewhere, in order to get through this situation. And I think over time, experience will teach us, who is really reliable, and who isn't. We always hope to learn from something like this so it doesn't get repeated. So that's one of the ways in which we can get through this is, there are those who we can listen to and give us information that's very useful. The other thing in dealing with the distancing is we do have technology, and that technology will allow us, many of us to work from home, and we can call our loved ones. There's programs and applications in which we can say, do a telephone call and actually see the person on the other end. That's very handy. That's a way in which you can do that. Now, not everybody has those tools, and some of us may have to go old-fashioned. It might be something as antiquated as writing a letter. Wow, there's a lost art for some people. And clearly, emails and text messages are available to us. So, again, that's a way in which we can close the gap of communication with some people, because we do want to be mindful of the time in which we're operating in. So I don't take these things lightly, and we make sure that we make a concerted effort to be responsible in how we behave. And I certainly want to do that with my messaging to you. So what I've been sharing is, these are some of the ideas that I have, but it's more that relates to the individual. So something I want to pivot to this, and it's to talk about maybe other individuals in your sphere of influence and how to help them through this situation. And if you can be in communication with them, either through emails or if you have a phone that you can talk to them, cell phone. And I think it's really important to try to make the personal contact. While text messages and emails are a form of communication, I think hearing the voice and seeing the face, if you can do Skype or that type of communication, really helps people stay at ease. Because these are the times in which we tend to feel most connected to people, when we can see them and we can't touch them at this point, because that's the whole point of this is to make each one of us safe, and we don't want to risk transmission. So, but think about those individuals and reach out to them, talk to them, listen to them when they have feelings that they want to share about what it is to feel isolated or to feel afraid or to feel scared, and reassure them that you can get through this. Follow the protocols that have been issued, and think about what's in your heart, the messages that you would like to communicate to people. And I believe it's also an opportunity to not only think about your friends, but maybe think about one of your neighbors up the street. And if you haven't called them and talked to them in a while, it's an opportunity to give them a call to reconnect with individuals we might not have thought about over a long time. I know I have a lot of phone numbers in my cell phone, and some of those numbers probably aren't any good anymore, and it probably would serve me to delete some. But there are definitely people that are on my mind from time to time, and I tend to wish them well. I might even send them a message or something on Facebook. But here's an opportunity to to reach out to them and say hello. and just to let them know that I'm thinking about them. And, these are the kinds of gestures that we can make that'll help people feel better and feel connected to their community. Because you never know how alone some of these individuals are. And I'm going to take a small break here, and I will pick up with this topic after the break. Stay tuned.
The GSMC Sex Podcast is a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet. Download the GSMC Sex Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you can find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
And we're back. This is John Johnson and the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I'm talking about dealing with distancing. Well, where I left off was the subject of when you've had people who you haven't contacted in a while, and episodes in life like this, these are life-changing situations, because this is something that's never happened in the lives of many, many, many people, to deal with a pandemic of the magnitude of this. Sometimes you can see things happen in a region. Let's take a natural disaster like a hurricane or an earthquake. Those things tend to be isolated in certain areas, but this is something that is affecting the entire country. And I'm here in the United States, Sacramento, California, as a matter of fact, when it happens in one area of the country and it doesn't really touch you directly, that disconnect, it really doesn't make you present to it, unless maybe you might have a relative or a family member that's affected by it, and you may get the stories. But something like this, where I'm in a community that's been asked to shutter indoors so that we stay safe, now everyone can relate to it in the very same way. And if it's one thing to say that how do we become close to other individuals, it's when we share a common experience. So now someone in the state of Oregon will have the similar experience as someone in California or the state of Washington or Nevada or Utah, anywhere across this country. So this may act as a unifying event. And this is different than war, fortunately, because war tends to create these divisions along not only ideology, but the politics and the religion and everything that gets thrown into that. This is something totally different, and it's really the kind of thing that can bring us all together as individuals. So when you're talking to people about what they are most afraid of, and I believe in definitely listening to them and trying to understand what their fears are, then you can deal with some of their with their worries by explaining that this too shall pass. And one of the things that helps people feel less alone is realizing that we are all in this together. And while that may sound kind of hollow, there really is a truth to it, especially with something like this, because we are all affected by this. I mean, think about it. It really doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter what neighborhood you live in, what kind of car you drive. See, a lot of things that if you're somebody that doesn't have a lot of status and you notice somebody that does have a lot of nice material things, you tend to feel disconnected from them because you don't have anything that you can relate. Well, now we're talking about something that deals with the health of everyone. And if you can imagine the magnitude of that, if you think about that for a minute, I mean, it might be hard to get your head around how massive this situation is. Now, I'm not a doomsdayer kind of person. I'm just saying, okay, think about the size of this problem and how you are not alone. You are not the target. You are not a victim of something you yourself. You share this situation with everyone in your neighborhood, whether you like them or not, and they share it with you. And an experience like this, where we all share the same problem, generally tends to give people an opportunity to come together. Because obviously we have to come together to fight the problem, to deal with it, to come up with a solution. And there's lots of opportunities for great ideas. There are obviously great minds that are working to solve this problem as I speak. And many others that potentially could be like this somewhere down the road. But that's a different story. But there are brilliant minds who are working on solving this problem. And that's a message to share with people who may feel shut in, who may feel alone and worried and scared. Because all of those things are very real. If you take a person who, you're walking through a grocery store right now and you're seeing shelves that are literally empty. I mean, when was the last time you saw that? Literally, completely empty. There are times in life where we've gone somewhere and we've looked for something and they've been out of the specific one that we want, but there may have been another one that was similar. And, that would satisfy you until what you specifically wanted was there. But now we are seeing situations where the shelves are totally empty. And that can be really scary. I mean, certainly if you've something of, your food and you're down to the last few bits of what's in your refrigerator, normally you would go down to the grocery store, buy it, come back home, prepare it, and you go on about your day. But now you can't even get it. You see, those are the kinds of situations that are very alarming to us as individuals, because, how many of us have actually faced something like that before? So when you take those kinds of things into perspective, those who are young, who haven't lived life and are seeing the people that they respect, the parents and grandparents who are really worried. Yeah, if, little kids, of course they're going to be scared, because in a lot of the communities around the country, now kids are being told to stay home. Now, initially, it might seem like it's Christmas vacation or a spring break or summer vacation. Well, that's one thing, but, the kids can't even really go outside, at least for the foreseeable future. There's limits on that. They're in my community, they're telling people if they want to walk their pets or they want to take a walk or a jog or something, they have to respect the personal space. But just the whole idea of how the quote unquote, the way our lives normally operated, that whole thing is being disrupted. And that's what's upsetting, because along with the change in our behavior, it's knowing, okay, what's next? And sometimes these things make perfect sense to us, and then other times they don't. And they might even get confusing or conflicting, because we'll hear one thing and not too long after that, there'll be another change and then another change. And then so parsing these things out can be a challenge. And explain it to, somebody who's afraid or scared of what might happen, that, this is these things are fluid, as we say. The picture changes fairly constantly, and in time we'll get a handle on it. But we also have to be flexible in how we problem solve so that we can come up with the best idea. I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
This is John Johnson, and you're listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. The topic is dealing with distancing, and in a sense, this global pandemic, the coronavirus, has given a lot of people concerns, and there's a lot of anxiety about what's happening because these situations are fluid, things are changing, instructions about what to do. Various communities have been asked to have their citizens shelter in place, and one of the things that we have to adjust to is, when you're very sociable, we're human beings, we're social creatures. We have people that we, as part of our life, part of our routine, we get out and we spend time with them. We go to our favorite place to eat. And all of those things are changing for us now. All of those options that we have for our day-to-day lives have been, a lot of them have been taken away. And it has the potential to make us not only very afraid and aside from that, frustrated, because it's certainly not, it doesn't seem right, but make us afraid and make us a little paranoid. But so how do we deal with that? How do we deal with the distancing when you've been, not just the personal space that we have to have from people, because that's how the experts say this is one of the best ways to prevent transmission of the coronavirus. But psychologically, where does that put you? And I think one of the things you want to do is you want to check in with your own feelings. Where are you on that? Do you find it easy to comply with these instructions, or is it challenging? And if it is challenging, why is it? I mean, I myself shared with you earlier the experience I had. I was talking to someone about some music. They were a school teacher, and was sharing just a story of something that a great experience I had just a week ago. And I look at that in one of the points that we connected on is, say, that experience, had it happened just 2 days after, then it probably wouldn't have happened. If it had been scheduled 2 days later, it probably wouldn't have happened. It would have been canceled. And so I was really looking at it from how fortunate I was to be able to have it. It was a once in a lifetime thing. I had a family member who was performing at Carnegie Hall, and I planned for weeks to make that trip, and to fly the airlines, make the plans, the hotel reservations, the ground transportation, that whole thing. So we do things in our lives around plans, and when those things get disrupted, then it's very stressful. We deal with that the best way we can, but there are some people who are not as well equipped to handle disruption. And so, what do you do for them? And what I've suggested is in the reaching out, talking with them. I mean, number one, reaching out, letting them, giving them a place where they can, share their feelings with you. And, share some of your own. I mean, if you have some life advice in situations that have been difficult that you have come through, that might be a good time to share that, because when you have something of substance that you can share with people how to problem solve, that gives people hope. And to say, number one, we can get through this. We will. That will happen. It's just going to take a while. We do have brilliant minds who are working on solving the problems. And because there's so many variables, there's so many citizens and circumstances that we try to mitigate, it seems like there are ideas and suggestions about how to deal with some of those problems. And the nuance of that probably happen, every couple of hours. And the reason that happens is because there are so many variables that we try to deal with. And it leads to things seemingly, it makes things seem very chaotic. And we should just admit that, recognize it, and know that that's because it's the kind of situation that it is. And denying that only makes it unreasonable for us to try to get our minds around it. So you have to acknowledge that it is chaotic in a lot of ways, and it takes a while to get the best ideas. We have to try things and to find out what works, whether it's telling people to stay indoors or letting them work from home, or all of these are ideas that they're trying, and we're going to see where it lands us. And if something better in terms of an idea comes along, then I'm sure that it'll get implemented. But to those who were really vulnerable, and I'm talking to some of the older citizens, and those who have compromised immune systems, or those who were, as the guidelines say, 65 and older, they feel that could be a higher risk category of people, and people who are very, very young, infants, babies. I think we want to do everything we can to protect them. And if you happen to live in the same home, just the proximity of being in that same home, you're going to be in the space where you can give them a hug to be reassuring. That's reasonably expected. But the guidelines themselves were designed so that if you have your home in your neighbor across the street isn't going to just come over and be inside of that 6-foot space, because the experts are saying the risk of transmission tends to go up. So sharing your own feelings with those in your own home, in your household, and I think it's good to talk about it, to get it out on the table, so that we're not hiding behind our own fears, which can really get blown up in a situation like this, because we generally fear the unknown and even our own ideas. So if we can start talking about what we're feeling and put that out there, I think we will all tend to feel better. And as we get a routine, whether it's staying in or whatever, once we get a routine, that'll make people feel better also. I think the challenge here is when things are constantly in a state of flux, when things are constantly changing, then that's very upsetting to people, because you have those who seem to have the latest information, and that's going to conflict with something that may have been said, say, maybe just yesterday. And that back and forth nature of something like this, like I say, is stressful. It makes the conversation stressful. So understand how the dynamics of this play out. And if you're running into situations like that, then take a step back, take a breath, know that we're all in this together, and we're trying to do the best that we can to get through it. And it's also a good opportunity to remind yourself and those that you are in communication with that you love them. That helps. And if you happen to know somebody who is of a higher risk population, then, care for them as you would want them to be cared for. And one of the other things that tends to help people get through situations like this is to be neighborly and to be thoughtful, to give the wave. Hey, I see you're out there thinking about you, as you're driving along. I mean, how many times have you actually said hello to your neighbor as you were driving down the street? I mean, if you're one of those friendly people that says hi to everybody, knows everybody, and you do that, yeah, good. Continue to do that. But if you're one of those individuals that never really notices your neighbors and, you just kind of drive by and you don't say hi to people, this would be an opportunity to acknowledge them. And I think create a new sense of community for not only them, but for yourself. It's situations like this that can actually bring out the best in people, the caring, the nurturing, and the specialness. And that's something that human beings can do. We've seen a lot of not good examples of what human beings do. And I'm talking about the hoarding and a lot of that stuff happens out of fear. Now, some people are trying to profiteer off the situation. And in my own personal opinion, that's not what should be happening here. And I'm aware of many attempts to stop people from profiteering in a circumstance like this. But going back to the better part of human beings, and it's being there, being supportive, being understanding, and helping the neighbors when they can in a way, and showing love and showing unity and togetherness. That's how we get through something like this. This is how we can deal with the distancing. We can close the gap and show people that they are important, that they're a part of the human race, and we want to connect with them. I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.